last Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the Biden-Harris administration's request to enforce portions of its revised Title IX rules. Now, this is the set of rules which illegally attempts to change the meaning of the word sex to include gender identity. The Biden administration was seeking to allow biological men in women's bathrooms, locker rooms, and dorms. This would have applied to 10 states where there are, by the way, already state level and local level rules to prevent such things. So what does all of this mean to the other 40 states? What does it mean for Title IX revisions moving forward? To discuss all this with me is Matt Sharp. He's a senior counsel and director of the Center for Public Policy at Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the organization that represents a female athlete, Christian teachers, and a Louisiana school board in all of these lawsuits. Matt, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Jody.
All right, so congratulations on this really a big Supreme Court win. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we were very excited to see the Supreme Court make this ruling. You know, we've seen for years now the Biden-Harris administration with its dangerous rewriting of Title IX, how it undermines opportunities for women, impacts fairness in sports, and harms girls' privacy and safety. We've had 22 states that have gotten injunctions against this, and to see the Supreme Court uphold and allow those injunctions to keep going into effect in these 10 states, as you mentioned, is a big win for women and people everywhere that are concerned about the radical gender ideology that's being pushed by the Biden-Harris administration.
Well, and it's interesting, the fact that this affects 10 states specifically. Just as a practical matter, here we are with a new school year upon us. There have been some other lower court decisions blocking these rules in other states as well. But what's the current landscape from a national perspective on this issue? What are we looking like?
Yeah. Well, again, we're seeing states across the country that have been told by the Biden-Harris administration that they were going to have to allow boys to go into girls' locker rooms and restrooms. And these injunctions that are happening now and that the Supreme Court let go into effect are really the stopgap against that happening. It's making sure that as students are going back, that you're not going to have your daughter walk into a locker room to find a guy sitting there as she's getting dressed for class, or that a young boy may not be forced to use an inaccurate name or pronoun. So what these rulings are doing is giving clarity. They're giving confidence to school officials in these 10 states and the numerous others that have lower level injunctions that they don't have to follow this unlawful Biden-Harris rewriting of Title IX, that they continue to put their students' safety and privacy and the fairness for young women in sports at the forefront of their policies as they're heading into the school year.
So about how many states are we talking about now where the Biden administration's rules are not going to be enforced?
Yeah. So we've got the 10 states that were involved in the Supreme Court's ruling on Friday. In addition, there's another about dozen states that all have lower level court injunctions. So total, I think we've got about 22 states. There's a few others that there's ongoing litigation. We're hopeful there that the lower courts will likewise give an injunction so that schools in those states don't have to comply with this unlawful Title IX rewriting of what it means to be male and female, of what sex means under Title IX. And so with all of that, we may see over half the country here within the next few weeks have an injunction protecting kids' privacy and safety, protecting schools from losing funding, and ultimately rebuking the Biden-Harris administration for trying to rewrite Title IX.
Well, that is so encouraging. And once again, let me just say, a huge hats off to you and ADF. Incredible job with all of this. And thank you. It's great to see the continued progress nationally on this issue. Now, I guess somewhat disturbing, perhaps a little bit of silver lining in all of this. It was a 5-4 decision with the Supreme Court. But as I understand it, the unsigned portion might indicate that perhaps all the justices, at least to some degree, are in agreement that the lower courts were proper to block some of these changes. Is there anything we can read into the unsigned portion?
Yeah. To your point, all nine of the justices agreed to let the injunction against the Title IX redefinition of sex. The other elements that try and insert gender identity into Title IX, all 9 justices agreed to let that injunction stay in effect. That's a huge victory when all 9 justices recognize that the Biden administration's that the injunction ought to be allowed. There was a little bit of quibbling where we had that 5-4 split about should this apply only to those specific parts of Title IX or to the entire rule itself. But I think the real thing people need to take hold of is all 9 justices said, we're going to allow these injunctions in these 10 states. This is Louisiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, and several other states. All 9 justices agreed to let those injunctions stay on the books while these cases move forward. And I think that's a huge victory for common sense, for women's equal opportunities, and ultimately for the rule of law, telling the Biden-Harris administration that they cannot rewrite this federal law that's been on the books for decades and has been so important to countless women across the country.
Well, and I think that does send a message to perhaps some future lawsuits. And I mean, you know this a whole lot better than I do. But I mean, obviously, this is not a final decision. The lawsuits are going to be returned now to the lower courts. So eventually, when all is said and done, this might go right back to the Supreme Court. Is that right?
That's right. These cases are still moving along. I know with the Tennessee and Kentucky cases, for example, I think they're scheduled for an expedited argument here pretty soon. But the big takeaway from all of this is we're seeing time and time again as courts are looking at this, they're ruling that the Biden-Harris administration's rewrite of Title IX went far beyond the law, that it doesn't have the authority to override Congress when Congress wrote this decades ago, trying to create equal opportunities for women. And here's the Biden-Harris administration saying, you know what, we're going to co-opt that law and we're going to use it to push radical gender ideology on schools across the country. So we're hopeful we're going to see more courts and that ultimately the Supreme Court will agree and strike down this rule in its entirety.
I tell you, you know, it seems like there's so much bad news, Matt, these days. And to see so many cases like this where there are victories, where it's ADF and some other fantastic organizations out there pushing the needle, it just brings great encouragement to all of us. Thank you so much.